you Feminerds out there. This is Beckah.
And this is Leigh.
And we are so excited to be joined tonight by Kate and Jen, who wrote the amazing comic Novae. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourselves?
Hello, I'm Kate.
Hello, I'm Jen.
Thank you so much for being here. We'll go ahead and ask a few questions about the comic, and we are really excited to have you here. Thank you. So a little bit about the story. Its tagline is How Two Lost Stars Locked Gravity. It is 17th century France, the age of discovery and scientific revolution. Sylvain, a mysterious traveler, is absorbed in the Parisian academic scene. Through his friendship with the renowned Christian Huygens, Sylvain has the chance to study the latest discoveries of the distant cosmos. Deep in the library of the Academy of Sciences, however, our traveler will meet Huygens' apprentice, Raziel Quamar, who will truly spark new lights in Sylvain's universe. But as the two grow closer, trouble brews in the city.
Was it always a dream to make a comic, or did you just start drawing or painting or writing?
I guess I can go first.
Yeah.
I wanted to be a comic artist when I was little. And when I'm deciding to go to college, to art college, I was thinking like, okay, which one should I pursue, comic or animation? I decided to go with animation because I wanted to learn a different skill. I was thinking I could pursue comic on my own. I kind of just like draw for fun. So I guess in a way it is like a dream for me to be a comic artist. It just took me like a roundabout way to get there, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. I guess for me, I didn't really think about doing comics until probably college. I was definitely interested in film and in directing and animation and that kind of stuff. But I took a few film classes, and I decided that I didn't really like being a director. But I still wanted to do my own stories. So I decided, well, if I can pretty much be the director and the entire staff if I do comics. I could just get my story out that way. And I guess that's why I ended up pursuing it in college and just trying to hone that craft.
Yeah, because she's actually a comic major and I'm like an animation major, and we just like ended up hanging out together.
Yeah.
Nice. Is there any plans to actually do an animation?
I wish we could.
Yeah, I wish we could. But we're thinking about that for our Kickstarter trailer because we have like animator friends, and we're just like, can we just do like 30 seconds of it, for fun? Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. So was this a story you had already planned, or did you have to find a topic to write about?
It was kind of a spur of the moment type of thing.
Yeah, because we each had our own story. They're separate characters and separate stories. And Sylvain actually came about through like my only game of D&D I've ever done in my life. I want to do more, but like there was no time. It just didn't work out. But like, and Kate made her character.
Oh yeah, my character was based on a short story that I had planned. And
it would be spoiler to say what the story is about.
Yeah, but we decided, it'd be fun to do a crossover. Why don't we just do a crossover?
Well, actually, you were reluctant.
Yeah, I was reluctant. You're the one who suggested it.
Yeah, I was like, let's do a crossover. She's like, no, it might be weird. I'm like, no, it would be great. And like, yeah, that's what happened.
I got so involved in the relationship between Raziel and Sylvain. What inspired you to write a gay romantic story? Did you consider using female characters?
Well, it didn't really start out as a romance. We just thought it'd be fun to do a crossover, so we were just like, okay, let's just see what happens between these characters. And then we found out, like, they actually have really good chemistry. So we thought, it could be really fun to, like, explore their relationship and that aspect as well. So maybe we could just go that direction.
Yeah, so there is actually a pretty complicated, like, story plot behind Novae. And their relationship is just going to keep on like snowballing in this really complicated plot. And so that's what it ended up being. Like right now we're at the beginning stages of everything, but it's going to get more involved as it goes on. And we like the idea of exploring romantic relationships within that frame. Yeah. And I guess like it hasn't really crossed our minds to make them female because they came to us as male. And the thing is, like, it really depends for the different characters we have. Like, sometimes the characters will morph a lot. Like, sometimes they could be male, they could be female, they could be genderqueer. Like, we're not really sure until we've written about them.
Yeah, like I've definitely had characters that I've changed their gender based on maybe I got older and I'm like, oh, maybe this character would be better as this gender instead of that gender. But I guess for them, like they just kind of came to us that way, so we decided to stick with it.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I hadn't ever thought of that before, that the plot really came first and that these two characters came from different universes, that they were just kind of thrown together. But because their chemistry is so good, it really just feels like they belong together.
And I also really appreciate your detail to the diversity in this world. Every time I read and I find out something new about a different person's sexuality or their gender or their race or a disability, I just get real excited because it's not something you see a lot in comics.
Yeah, it was really, really enjoyable. So this comic becomes a fun introduction to astronomy. What is your interest in science?
Well, I've loved science ever since I was little. It's always been something I was interested in, and I guess astronomy, like my interest in astronomy just kept growing as I got older, and I learned more and more about how the universe works. And a lot of my stories end up being about like astronomy, just because it's so interesting. Like first you learn about the planets, and you learn about the stars, then you learn about like how there's time differences between the stars, and it's just so like there's just so inspirational. And I can't really say where it's come from, but like it's just always been there, my interest.
I guess for me, I like science that changes my perception of the world. And you should tell the story about how the trees don't rot.
Oh, yeah. There was like this, I think it was an article in National Geographic that basically all of our coal comes from this certain period of time in history that trees did not decompose because there was no bacteria that could eat trees.
Yeah, and then she told me this, and I was just like, this is so cool. Like, things decompose because there are bacteria that ate them, but, like, certain times there wasn't bacteria that ate certain things. And I'm like, oh, my God. And
so
that's
just, like, trees piling on top of each other because they're not getting decomposed, and it's just compressing into...
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's great. And so about that, because you told me that you saw the Ring of Saturn.
Oh, right.
Because she was in New York, and she went out just with friends walking around,
Yeah,
and there was this guy who's looking at Saturn through a telescope, and he was like, you want to see? And they're just like, yeah. And then they got to see the Ring of Saturn, so I was kind of jealous because I didn't get to see it. And so I went to see that in Taiwan. There was an observatory in Taiwan, and you can go at night. And so basically you line up and you look into those like giant telescopes and you get to see the Ring of Saturn. So like I was so excited, I hit my eye on the eyepiece because I could not judge like the distance between them. But it's so surreal because you don't think like, okay, there's a planet out there that looks like this. It looked like a little piece of picture that's like just like pasted onto the thing because it looks so flat since it was so far away. But like it's real, you know. And that's something I love about science. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like, it was so surreal seeing Saturn for the first time. It's like, oh my gosh, it's real.
Yeah, and like I imagine for Raziel back,
Yeah.
you know, when they're making the first discoveries, it must have been like mind blowing, you know, to be able to see that. You know? Yeah.
So are these characters based on real historical figures?
Well, the two main characters are not. There are some historical figures in there that are kind of more like side characters. Christian Huygens I don't really know how to
Or
pronounce it.
Hyagans, I have no idea. It's really hard. I looked it up and it was just really hard pronunciation. So forgive her
so I'm not going to try to pronounce it I'm not going to try to pronounce it the right way, but yeah, Raziel's mentor, Huygens, is he's definitely historical. He's the one who made the glass on the telescope more clear so that you could actually see the rings of Saturn. Before that, you weren't able to tell what they were because they were just these blurry objects.
People thought they were ears.
Yeah, people thought they were ears. That's why, Sylvain mentions that he thought they were ears.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was a genius, and he did a lot. He did a lot of discoveries.
Yeah.
And we also included his real apprentices. What are their names again?
Dennis Papin.
Yeah, Dennis Papin and
Gottfried Leibniz.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And they're his real apprentices, and they appeared really briefly as tiny people in the in the 5th chapter where they're in the library, and then Raziel was dealing with some unpleasant people, and then they're like, oh, we need your calculations or whatever, and he called him over, and that's Huygens' real apprentices.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I didn't realize that some of the characters were historical figures and that they had little cameos. That's fun. So I've never been to Paris. So are any of the locations based on actual sites?
Well, we've never been either.
We really want to go, but...
I really want to go, especially when I have to draw a certain angle of a certain building, and I do not have any reference for it.
Except for Google Map.
Except for Google Map, which I use frequently. I'll just walk the streets and try to find the...
And you try to drag the little person and be like, I want this angle, and you drop them, and it won't do it. But
yeah, there's definitely some historical buildings. There's
the Academy of Sciences. We don't know what it looks like from the inside because it's kind of hard to find reference pictures, but we are referencing the outside of it. So inside, we kind of just made it up, really.
Well, I did find some pictures.
Like etchings from
we do use a lot of, there's a lot of etchings that we refer to.
Yeah.
And let's see what else. There's the Pont Neuf Bridge.
The Pont Neuf Bridge.
Where you see in the beginning, 4 pages.
There's the Louvre.
Yeah, there's the Louvre.
And there is the Paris Observatory.
Yeah, there's a Paris Observatory, which you see in chapter 2.
That's actually newly built. At the time, the king just built it. And also, Sylvain lives in the Latin quarters. So that's kind of like our interpretation of it, because I don't know what it looks like
back then
300 years ago. So those are some of the locations that we used, and we also there's this book called City of Light, City of Poison by Holly Tucker, and so she writes about Paris during that era, and it's about the affair of poison, I think it was called. Yeah. So we use that book for reference sometimes. And and it's really helpful. It helps us to build the world a little more, since none of us can read French, and a lot of the documents are in French. If you want to get more into detailed things, there's a lot of French sources, but I can't read them. So I try to rely on different things to build the world.
Sorry.
You can go anytime you want. I can cut all of this out, whatever I'd like.
Okay. Did you have to research a lot of different cultures to maintain the sense of authenticity in the stories?
So we try as much as we can.
Oh, yeah.
But it's still very difficult because there's just so many minute little things about cultures, about even just things that did they speak French or Latin back then? It's just if you're not a professor on the subject, it's really hard to catch every single thing. So we try the best we can, and and we understand that it's also a hard thing to get everything right. So so if we do get things wrong, we ask people hey, correct this for us, because there are just things that's kind of out of my reach at this moment. But
Yeah, I mean, we do as much as we can, especially like concerning culture. There was one book that we found about, like we were trying to figure out something for like Raziel's dad and him, and like it was very hard to find material about that certain time period.
It's like Muslims in 17th century France.
Yeah, we did find one
book, and it's like a university published book, and it was just like, so it's like it's hard because it's you have to be specialized in that topic, and you learn it, and as a professor or in a class, they can probably like have an entire class about those those information. And so Sylvain is also using so sign languages isn't really a thing back then. There's no universal sign languages. It's something that you would develop with somebody you're close with. And so later down the line, he will be using a more recognizable form of sign language, and that's when we'll probably need professional help. And I also would love to learn the language myself, because I looked into it and I thought it was really, really amazing. So yeah,
you were learning it pretty well too.
Like I want to learn more, and I'm just like, I need more time to learn the language.
There's a really great website that has sign language in different countries, and that'll show you how.
Yeah, so I try to like compare, because it's like basically you have different languages throughout different countries. And so it's research land.
That you did so much research to really base the story in our own universe, which it of course is not quite our own, because there's some elements of like magic and with the necromancy. So what made you decide to base the story in our own reality rather than setting it in a whole other universe?
Well, I guess it's just the historical aspect of it, because my character it always took place in the real world. It was always about it was always about astronomy during that time period, and that kind of just added, for me, it added like a new depth to the story that I couldn't get if it was like a fantasy story, or if it was something a little more loose, I guess.
It's like you like how like there's a grounded element to it, and
it relates to your own understanding of the world as well.
Yeah. And I guess that goes back, because I was thinking about it, I'm like, it kind of goes back to how science expands your understanding of the world, and all of a sudden you're like, this changes my perception. So I kind of like that idea of magic being in that world being kind of the same thing. Like it's an element to the world that kind of changes the perception of what you think the world is. So I like to weave magic into history, because there are things like, there are myths and legends. Like there are things like Merlin and other figures in history that is like, they're a wizard, where they did certain they had magical abilities. Like Rasputin, like he's a holy man. He healed, the queen's son and things like that. So I thought that was interesting. And like, what if they're actually real? But history is turned into a way that they became kind of just like these legends, where it's not real, it's superstition and like things like that. So I'm kind of like just interested in exploring the world through that route kind of thing. Yeah.
Do you draw your images by hand and then scan them into a computer, or do you draw them digitally?
We draw everything by hand.
Yeah.
We draw it on paper. Jen inks everything on paper.
We each draw our own characters.
Yeah, we each draw our own characters.
So she draws Raziel and I draw Sylvain.
And I draw the backgrounds.
She draw the backgrounds, and I make Google SketchUp of the space. To
like
help
if there's
us.
a library or something, we'll make a 3D model, and we'll basically print it out in blue and then add details to it.
Yeah, like too many shelves in the library, like brain cannot grasp it.
We usually use like 3D models for the room just to get different angles of the room.
Yeah.
Like I don't use it for outside things as much.
You use like photographs sometimes?
Yeah, I try to like base it off of photographs most of the time. And sometimes you just have to make it up because it's just impossible to like figure it out otherwise.
Yeah, and then we scan it in and we color it digitally and we bubble everything digitally. So so that's our process, I think. Yeah.
That's a really fascinating process. I really like the idea of using kind of a 3D model to understand the space and how your characters fit into it. I also am surprised that you each draw your own characters because they fit so well in the world together, so that's really fun. I also love the little hints of manga in some of the drawings. So who are some of the artists that have influenced you?
You can look at it. Which one was that one?
Okay, I'm just gonna talk.
That's fine.
So we both love manga and we love anime. Like that's what got Kate into drawing.
Oh yeah,
essentially.
definitely.
Yeah, and that's what got me into being comic artist too. Like I saw Sailor Moon when I was tiny in elementary school, and I literally thought it was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in the world. And I would just like copy panels from it. And so, but since we've grown, our influences are kind of like different now. So one of our major influence is Kaoru Mori. She did Bride's Story,
Yeah, I think it's
Bride's Story, and Emma. And another one is Fuyumi.
I think it's Fuyumi Soyu.
Soyu.
Yeah.
Soyu, yeah. She did Mars. And recently she is working on a
She's working on a historical
Cesare about the Borgias, I think. And she also was in collaboration with, I think, the Louvre. She did a little one volume manga on Marie Antoinette, and it's not translated, but I have it in Japanese because I adore her art style. And another influence is probably Urasawa Naoki. So he did Monster, he did Pluto, and like I guess like I just somehow like unconsciously absorbed the way that he panels things, because the way that he panels things is really like powerful in my opinion. So I think those are our influences.
Yeah, I see those are the main ones.
Those are the main ones, yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much for talking about your Volume 1. We'd also really like to discuss the prequel, which we just read the other day and was very, very good. So my first question is, I was so intrigued by Bevan's character. It's rare to find a gender fluid character in comics. So what was your inspiration behind this character's story?
I guess, I mean, when I think about characters, they just kind of come to me, like, most of the time, like, I'm not really consciously trying to create a character. I just sort of see them as they are, and then I start to get to know them the more that we write. And I guess for Bevan, Bevan was always a very free character in my head, like somebody who just does what she wants, and she is very comfortable identifying as either male or female, and depending on the situation or depending on his mood, it could be basically, this is really hard to explain.
I guess it's just like Bevan doesn't like any type of restrictions.
Yeah.
I feel.
Yeah.
And so she navigate the world by their own terms, I feel. And that's why in the prequel, when Raziel is like, well, do you want to stay together? Like, are you serious about this? Like, Bevan isn't really down with that idea, because in a way it takes away his or her freedom, you know. And I think it's like a really deep rooted thing in their character.
Yeah, definitely.
It's like it's a huge part of them, and they just can't that they just can't part with. I feel. Yeah.
yeah, I guess it's just yeah. Like when I think of Bevan, I think of it's freedom. It's about going down the path that you want to go down without being restricted by anything around you. That kind of thing.
I really loved the character of Bevan, and after she was introduced and I understood a little bit more about him, I went back and looked at chapter 3 where he was introduced in the flashback because I interpreted Bevan as male, and so understanding that she's more of a gender fluid character, I saw then that she was drawn wearing like a corset under her open shirt with her scene with Raziel. And so it was really cool that we got a little bit more in-depth information about that character and his relationship with Raziel. And it's really nice to see Raziel be a pansexual or bisexual character, you know, when Bevan kind of comes out to him, so to speak, and is like, are you okay with this? He's just like, heck yes, let's do it. And that was really sweet and really nice to see him validated in that way. So do you think we will see any female or lesbian characters enter the story in the future?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, we've already introduced one female lesbian character. She appears in chapter 5, at the end of chapter 5, and she is basically Death. And
like I have a really extensive backstory for her. I guess I can spoil since I don't know when I'm going to do the story.
yeah.
But basically, she is the concubine of this imperial emperor in China. And because emperors in China have a lot of concubines. So what she does is she would go around and get with the ladies. You know, because, like, you know, he can't sleep with everybody. Somebody has to.
I can't remember everything I said. What did I say?
We should definitely fund that. We're all about that.
Okay. All right. Well, I can't wait for that. So you guys had mentioned a Kickstarter, so whenever that starts, I'm fully funding that. So the prequel seems to delve around Raziel's relationship with his father. I was surprised at how open-minded and compassionate he was in this volume. There are other challenges and dangers the characters face in this story, but their sexuality doesn't seem to be one of them. That's very rare in comics and also very refreshing and progressive. Was that what you intended, and what were your thoughts behind this?
Yes. To be like, I mean, I guess personally, I don't really like to focus on, like, there's a lot of stories that do or already focus on characters going through trials and tribulations because of their sexuality and gender. But, you know, queer characters are going to experience all sorts of problems in their life. It's not just going to be about that.
Like, we're queer.
Yeah.
And we're individual people with full lives, and our life is not just about sexuality and suffering. You know, it's a big part of some individuals' life for sure, and it's important to talk about it. And I'm glad that there are work out there that explores these aspects because it's important. But I guess for our work, I want to explore our characters as people with these complicated lives, and they deal with different problems. You know, like, you know, sexuality isn't going to be your only problem in life. You know, you have family, you have friends, you have, you know, your romantic partners, and
you have
different relationships,
you know, career problems,
relationships, and like you have everything to really worry about. You know,
yeah. And I guess like for Raziel's, concerning Raziel's dad, he just is. I definitely think it would be sort of hard for him to just like accept that Raziel is bi, that he would be interested in men, but in the end, he just really, really loves his son.
Yeah, he loves his son to pieces.
So like it's eventually he's just gonna have to accept that.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's it's not a big part of the story to begin with.
Yeah. So it's like we did think about like, well, how is his dad going to take this information? And I just think like, yeah, like there is going to be a period, you know, of him really mulling over it and stuff. But in the end, because he loves his son, it's something that he will accept, you know. And it's kind of funny how Sylvain will fit into all this, but like, but yeah. So I think that's our thoughts on it.
Yeah, and we wanted to talk about something else related to that too. What was it? Just about... Oh, basically, like when we're writing stories, we're sort of writing it for ourselves. We want to write about something that's kind of like what we want to read about.
Yeah.
So, like, you know, if we're gonna make a story about queer characters, it's gonna be something about how they are multifaceted and they have a lot of like problems that they deal with, and it's problems that we want to see them go through. And it's just, I guess that's just why we write the way we do. I don't know.
Yeah.
That is so great. Thank you so much for sharing all of that insight. It's really great to see how these comics come together, what the inspiration is, and all of the thought and love that goes into it. So we'll close by asking you, what are you working on right now? Where can we find your work? And anything else you want to share with us?
Well,
I'm just gonna look at you.
So we're still working on Novae. We're about one chapter into the next volume. We're definitely planning a book eventually. We're not really sure when.
Yeah, we're exploring different options.
We're exploring different options for printing and that kind of thing. And we just signed a contract with Penguin to be doing a middle grade graphic novel series.
Yeah, it's gonna be sci-fi fantasy coming out in 2020, fall 2020. It's going to be about about like 3 girls saving a city, but it is also
you might not want to give away too much.
Okay,
but it centers around like the main girl character. She's a tinkerer and she's a survivalist, and she's and it's about a city that has a wall around it. So, and it's about sci-fi things that happen. Sci-fi
things that happen.
Sci-fi things that happen. Yeah,
and giant robots.
It's going to be really fun.
Yeah.
And can we find your work?
And you can find our work at novaecomic.com. And on the website, you can find our Twitter and Tumblr on there too. And I think that's about it, huh?
That's about it.
Well, thank you so much, Jen and Kate, for being here tonight and talking with us about Novae and all of your wonderful work. We're so excited to spread the word about this comic. We both love it so much, and we're really excited to see what else you have to offer.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us.
Okay, this has been another exciting episode of File 741. I'm Leigh.
I'm Beckah.
Thank you for listening, and please like us on Facebook or follow us on Instagram and Twitter. You can tune in to all of our podcasts on iTunes, Podbean, YouTube, or at thefeminerdfiles.net.